Well, what do we have here? If you had asked me like 10 years ago whether Alfa Romeo will be turning electric anytime soon, I probably would have scoffed at you and say that you're probably in need of some mental health checkup. But the truth of the matter is it was bound to happen one way or another. And the car you see right next to me is the very first Alfa Romeo with a purely electric drivetrain. And it also marks a couple of premieres for the Italian brand, like the fact that it uses a French platform underneath it all. And this is, at the moment, the smallest and the most compact model you can buy with an Alfa Romeo badge. Now, let's call it by its name. This is the Alfa Romeo Milano. Oh, Alfa Romeo Junior. What you just saw is basically what Alfa Romeo did when they unveiled this car. And some said that they have been total idiots, but I would say that was actually a marketing ploy, because I am absolutely convinced that they knew about what would happen if they kept the Milano name. Now, in case you're not aware, this car was supposed to be named Milano when it was originally unveiled. The problem is, this isn't made in Italy, this is made in Poland. And the Italian government has a very strict policy when it comes to naming products after cities in Italy or famous places in Italy, and so on and so forth. That rule says that you cannot use those nameplates if the car is not actually made in Italy. So there was a huge scandal and they changed the name from Milano to Junior. Now what you should know is that the timeline was very short. So after they unveiled the car, there was a scandal, and I don't think it even took like a couple of days, and they came up with the Junior name. In my book, I don't think everyone over at Alfa Romeo was that incompetent. And I think this was just a marketing ploy to get everyone to talk about this weird situation. And I think they were prepared with the Junior name from the get-go. But so far, nobody admitted that this was a marketing ploy, and we got that scandal overall. So this is the Alfa Romeo Junior. And in this configuration, it is the very first electric Alfa Romeo. And I said in this configuration because the Junior is also available in a mild hybrid setup. So right next to me, you will see the most powerful, as this name over here on the front fender clearly says. So this is the most powerful Alfa Romeo Junior version, but you also have a less powerful one that's not a Veloce, and you also have a mild hybrid setup. So what you see next to me is basically a Peugeot E2008 with an Alfa Romeo badge. The reason I'm saying that is because this car, Alfa Romeo doesn't really have the resources to create a platform on its own to create such a small car. They only have the Giorgio platform used for the Giulia and the Stelvio, and they also have the Tonale built on a mixture of platforms, sort of speak. So they didn't really have the resources to create a new platform from the get-go, but luckily for them, they are part of the Stellantis group and they could use the CMP platform. Now this is the platform used for the Peugeot 2008, for the Citroën C4, for the Opel Mokka, for a number of cars. Even the Jeep Avenger is built on this platform. So it's a highly modular platform, but according to Alfa Romeo, they did their best to give this car a Alfa Romeo DNA. The way they did that could start with the exterior design. Now, normally when you see cars built on modular platforms, you rarely couldn't tell that is the case. So there are some areas where they will all look alike. Most often than not, the C-pillar, because that's a structural part of the car and it's quite hard to change its design. On this car, I think you would be hard-pressed to tell that it's basically a Peugeot E2008 underneath the sheet metal. So in terms of design, you will easily notice that the front end is very aggressive. We have these headlamps over here with LED daytime running lights on top of them, with full LED Matrix HD function, and we have the huge Alfa Romeo shield up front, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, a lot of die-hard Alfa Romeo fans will be ticked off by the fact that the license plate holder is no longer to the side, but actually right down the middle. Now, that used to be the case for a lot of older Alfa Romeo models that had a huge shield in the front bumper. But since this car has a smaller one, they had enough room to fit the license plate holder right beneath the shield, close to the ground. Other things you might notice on this car that are specific to it are the wheels, the flared fenders up front and in the back. You know, the proportions overall are quite aggressive. Now, since this is the Veloce version, we do have 20-inch wheels on this car, which are standard and quite big for a car in this segment. Mind you, the Junior is a subcompact crossover, so it runs in the same segment in terms of size like the Ford Puma, the Dacia Duster, the Hyundai Kona, and so on and so forth. So seeing 20-inch wheels on these cars, on this car in particular, is quite huge, right? But they are part of the Veloce package, right? And they look absolutely brilliant. And you might also notice that they are hiding some pretty huge brakes as well. 380 millimeters brake discs up front, held together by red brake calipers, of course, with 4 pistons. So quite an impressive setup in that regard. And also, if you pay closer attention to this frame, they are running on Michelin Pilot Sport EV tires. So this car was set up to be very, very nice to drive. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the driving part. So total length under 4.2 meters. So that should make it very easy to park around town. The wheelbase is 2,558 millimeters, and we'll see how that translates into interior space. And looking at the C-pillar, you cannot tell this is a Peugeot underneath it all, because they did some tricks. We have the Alfa Romeo badge over here, the famous snake, right? And around the back, they say that the design was inspired by the Alfa Romeo TZ model of the 60s. And I tend to agree. It's a very sharp cut rear end, and I actually like it, and it's definitely unique. And I actually like the fact that you have the Alfa Romeo name written in cursive in their traditional style on the back end over there. So from the outside, the only 2 elements that will tell you that this is a Peugeot are the side mirrors and the door handles on the front doors, because the rear doors have a different handle, right? So that's pretty good in my book. But let's check out the interior and see how many Peugeot remnants are still left on this car. For those more interested in the practical side of things, let's talk about the interior, and let's start with the boot. So 400 liters of space over here, which is quite a lot for a car in this segment, right? It's quite fitting, and we do have some practical anchor points over here. We have the same on the right side. We have a plug, 12-volt plug, and the boot floor can be adjusted, as you can see over there. You can adjust it to be flush with the loading lip, right? We also have some extra storage under the floor for your cables and what not. So unfortunately, the rear bench cannot be folded in a 40-20-40 split, right? So you only have a 60-40, but I think you could manage either way. And we have an electrically operated tailgate on this car. Let's hop inside. Let's check the build quality first. So really, really bad plastic over here. This is not fitting for a premium car, as Alfa Romeo claims to be, right? Rough touch plastics all over, not even here where the rear passengers might sit their elbows. You don't have soft touch materials, right? So that's unfortunate. You don't have a cup holder, right? So, or even some storage space in the door pocket. Then we have these. These are the seats for the Veloce Electrica version, right? So leather with Alcantara and these red stitching, all around. Quite a nice surprise in terms of build quality in this regard, not in this regard, right? Let's hop in, let's check out the space you get. So I'm 6 feet tall. The driver's seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position, and this is how I fit in the back, right? So yeah, I'm not touching the seat, but these are the optional sub-belt seats. I don't know if the regular seats are just as sculpted over here in the back to offer the same amount of room. This should not be happening on a sub-belt seat, okay? If you don't know who sub-belt is, they are making seats for a number of companies. This is like their thing, and you might find them even in Ferraris, right? Now I know this is not a Ferrari, but still it does say sub-belt on it, and this is not exactly okay in my book, right? Cool. So what else? So we don't have air vents over here in the back, but we do have a USB-C charger. So that's okay. I don't think this car was actually thought out to be used by more than 2 people. Headroom is impressive. I'm not touching, even though this is a subcompact car. So usually I do touch the roofliner with my head, but it's not the case here. And this is how the dashboard shapes up. So yeah, they did their best to change things up a lot. This doesn't really seem like a Peugeot model, for example, but there are some things that will seem familiar, like the start-stop button, you know, the gear shift lever, or metaphorically speaking, the driving selector, the driving mode selector, right? So the fonts are the same and the buttons are the same, but there are some important differences overall. Only a few items were kept, right? So the front door cards also use very bad plastic, at least on the top side, but over here in the front you do have some soft touch materials, right here where you will make contact with the car. The buttons are definitely from PSA. This is the door pocket, right? And these are the front seats. These are the sub-belt seats. They look amazing. I absolutely love them. And they are incredibly comfortable. You would think that they might not be as comfortable as you would imagine, but they are. They have a lot of padding and they feel great. They offer a lot of side support and everything in between. Now, the driver's side seat is electronically adjustable, whereas the passenger side is not. And that's quite disappointing. So this is the steering wheel. You have this nice animation when you get inside the car, right? You will notice these buttons over here as well. Very familiar from PSA models, but the air vents have been changed, and I actually like the fact that they have this snake logo. It is illuminated at night in red or green, depending on the driving mode, right? These stalks will seem very familiar as well, right? And this as well. And the startup procedure is very similar, because if you've ever driven a PSA model, you know that you have to keep your button pressed on the start. You have to keep your finger pressed on the start button to get the car to start or stop, right? So you need to keep it over there for a few seconds in order for the car to start. The infotainment system is taken straight off a PSA model, right? But luckily you do have Android Auto as standard with a wireless connection, and I think this works pretty fine. It's easy to use, no issues whatsoever. This is a 10.25-inch screen, in case you were wondering, and I think it's enough. I like the fact that it is driver-oriented, and you have these shortcuts over here for different areas of the car. For example, you can set a shortcut for this button to turn off the annoying road sign assistance systems. If we're talking about the instrument cluster, also 10.25 inches, the graphics will be very familiar, at least in this area over here, but on the sides we do have some gauges that do resemble Alfa Romeo, and if you zoom out, we do have these binoculars, right? The traditional Alfa Romeo binoculars that do give this car a lot of character, and they are backlit over here. This is the only interior lighting you will get. This is the Alfa Romeo logo, right? The dashboard is done in very bad plastic as well, but we do have Alcantara over here and some imitation of brushed aluminum over there. So overall, not too bad. I like the fact that they redesigned the center console, right? So it doesn't look exactly like a Peugeot. And that's good in my book. They did their best. And we do have a huge moonroof or sunroof, right? That's pretty nice. So what kind of choices do you get when talking about the drivetrains of the Alfa Romeo Junior? Well, it depends on your priorities. Now, the Junior is offered in two electric versions and one mild hybrid version. So the mild hybrid version is the one for people who are looking to use this car for longer trips as well, not only around town, and they are not willing to compromise their travel time for recharging the car. That version uses a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder mild hybrid setup with 136 horsepower and 230 newton meters of torque. It is the exact same drivetrain you will find on a number of Peugeot, Citroën models, on the Jeep Avenger and so on. It's a drivetrain I tested a number of times and it is quite efficient overall. And even though the older versions had issues with the timing belts, that's no longer the case. It uses a timing chain and it's a completely different setup. Then you have the two electric versions. So there's a base one, if you can call it that, which has 156 horsepower and 300 newton meters of torque, or 270, I'm forgetting that number right now. And then there's this version with 281 horsepower and 345 newton meters of torque. Both versions use the same battery. It's an NMC battery, 54 kilowatt hours in total, 51 usable, right? It's fitted under the floor, but there are some huge differences between them. Now, with this electric motor, this is basically the most powerful electric car built on this modular platform, because every single other electric car built on this platform has a maximum of 156 horsepower. So this with 282 is not even close. And that's just the beginning of the iceberg when it comes to the technical side of things, because the Alfa Romeo engineers that worked on this car are the same who worked on the Giulia. And they did their best to turn this platform into a highly desirable and very nicely driving version. What I mean by that is the fact that they tuned the suspension, they tuned the front axle, the rear axle, in order to make it as fun to drive as possible. So the ride height is lower by 25 millimeters compared to the normal electric version. And then you have different bushings, different anti-roll bars, and everything in between. Everything has been stiffened up to make this car a lot more controllable. Even the rear axle, even though it uses a torsion beam as a technical solution, it has an extra anti-roll bar in the back to keep the rear end very flat. On top of that, the dampers have been changed as well. Now, this car uses the same two-chamber dampers that you would find on a number of Citroën models. On those Citroën models, they are set up to be as soft as possible. So the goal of those two chambers is to make the ride very plush. In this car, they have been changed to give it a very refined and yet very stiff ride. It doesn't break your back, but it is incredibly refined and very confident in the way it approaches potholes and everything in between, right? So it's quite amazing to see the same dampers used on Citroën models, which in turn infuse them with a lot of body roll and everything. The Citroën models are basically boats on wheels. This car is 180 degrees on the other side of the handling perspective, right? So it is quite something. Now, let's talk about the electric motor over here. As I said, 282 horsepower. Now, what's interesting about this one is that it uses a Torsen Type D differential on the front axle. Now, the goal of Torsen differentials is to lock up depending on the wheel spin on the axle, right? So they've been used for a number of years, and the name of the Torsen differential comes from torque sensing, right? So whenever it feels slippage, it starts to lock up, and in this configuration, it can split the power evenly between the two front wheels to make sure you get the proper amount of grip. Now, if that Torsen differential wasn't fitted on this car, you would have an open differential. That means that you would occasionally have the chance of turning your front axle into a one-tire fire. That's a colloquial expression used by car guys. Basically, one of the wheels could spin so fast that it would burn rubber on let's say the right side, and this one would barely move, right? With the torque, with the torsion differential, that won't happen, because whenever the differential senses that one wheel has slippage, it will split the power to the other side, right? So it will split the power between them to make the car as efficient as possible when moving around and when we're talking about putting the power down. So quite an interesting technical solution, right? This is also the most powerful car built on the ECMP platform right now, with 282 horsepower, and it will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.9 seconds. That's just as fast as the 410 horsepower Volvo EX90, FYI. And it will top out at 200 kilometers an hour, which is a lot for any electric car. There are very few electric cars that can actually get to that 200 kilometer an hour point, right? So it's quite an interesting car, and I can't wait to drive it. Let's check out how well everything that I told you about up until now actually works in the real world. Let's go. I entered dynamic driving mode, and we just set off. Ooh, the initial pickup is strong. The car does die out at over 100 kilometers an hour, but it doesn't die out, it kind of slows down, right? So 0 to 100 in 5.9 seconds, and I'm going to be interested in mostly in how this car handles corners. Well, I can wholeheartedly say it does a very good job. What's most impressive is the way the front diff works, because under hard acceleration you do have some torque steer, and the steering wheel actually becomes alive in your hands, right? So that means you will have to kind of fight with the car to keep it steady, but it makes it feel so alive, and it does lock up rather fast, right? So it's quite an interesting feeling. And let's check the cornering. No issues whatsoever. Very, very flat through the corners, very fast. Wow, this is a scalpel. This feels like a hot hatch. It definitely feels like a hot hatch. It feels like a Golf GTI, if you will. It is incredibly refined, and it puts the power down brilliantly, and it's fast. So I'm doing 140 kilometers an hour right now. It is more than enough for a lot of people. But the thing I love the most is the way it handles in the corners, because you can actually put the power down really nicely in tight corners, right? So I'm accelerating right now. Oh my God, really, really nice. What I noticed is the fact that the car can understeer, but under heavy acceleration in the corner. So whenever you're mid-apex, right, you go hard on the gas pedal or the go faster pedal, and it can pull you towards the outside of a corner. But other than that, the car does not understeer. As a matter of fact, the rear axle is very eager to follow through. And since you have so much mechanical grip on the front axle, right? And I'm talking about lateral grip as well, the rear axle has a tendency to follow, and you can get that pendulum effect, right? So the rear axle will have the tendency to actually drift, right, up to a point. But I never felt any kind of understeer. And the rear axle, as I said, is very eager to follow through. It is quite an impressive achievement, and I think this car is and could be considered the modern day hot hatch, just because it keeps its composure so well in the bends. And the suspension is very forgiving too, because it is a bit stiff, but it's not uncomfortable, or and it doesn't lack refinement in any way. This is an amazing car overall. It drives brilliantly. God, I'm so thankful that I had the chance to drive it. It's so good, so good. It's just, as I said, it's a hot hatch in very, I don't know, very sophisticated leather jacket, because I'm thinking of its Italian character, right? So I'm thinking about how would I describe this car as a person, So once you get the tires heated up, the traction is even better. That is also something you need to keep in mind, because if they aren't heated up, you might end up with some unintentional drifts, right? So when accelerating hard, especially if you're turning slightly, you might notice that the car is going forward, not left or right, whatever you're turning. But once you heat up those tires, oh my God, amazing. Let's switch back to natural mode. The throttle response is a bit less brutal in this driving mode, and I think that's okay. But overall, it is an amazing driving experience. But leaving these B roads behind, how does it drive in other situations? Well, we're gonna find out, aren't we? Is this a proper car for longer trips? Well, not exactly. If you look at its size and dimensions and specs to some degree, you notice that this is basically a city car. For example, if you look at the Ford Puma Gen E, which is a rival for this car, well, not exactly in this configuration, but maybe for the 156 horsepower version, Ford specifically mentioned that it is meant to be used around town mainly. And I kind of agree, especially if you're talking about the Veloce model. This is the car you buy if you want to have fun, not if you want to travel for longer distances. It's not exactly the most comfortable car on longer trips. It's not the most refined car. It's not the quietest car. And it's not the most refined car either. Not the most efficient one. That's what I meant. So we're on the highway right now. And I'm going to show you just what it takes to make an overtake. So we're doing 80 kilometers an hour, 100, 110, 120, 130. So the speed limit over here is 130 kilometers an hour. You won't have any issues in keeping up with the traffic. As I mentioned, this car has a top speed of 200 kilometers an hour, so it won't have any issues in keeping up with the traffic, okay? But you have to be aware of the fact that the faster you go, the more energy you're gonna burn out, right? What a surprise. So in terms of energy consumption, during my range test with the car, I noticed an energy consumption on the highway of around 21 kilowatt hours at 130 kilometers an hour. Now, I know some of you are watching from countries where the speed limit is 120. The car will be more efficient at that speed, right? But over here, the speed limit is 130, so you probably could get, considering the battery has a usable capacity of about 51 kilowatt hours, you could get a total maximum range of about 250 kilometers on the highway. Let's assume you only burn out about 80% of the car's battery, so in order to avoid running out of energy completely, so that would give you about 200 kilometers of range overall, which is not exactly great, okay? So this isn't exactly the car for such exercises. We do have wider wheels, 20-inch wheels, right, on this car, so it wasn't exactly designed to be efficient, but it was designed to be fun, right? So that's what you should think about when comparing this car to other models in the range. In terms of quietness, if you will, I used my decibel meter and it showed an average of 79 decibels at 130 kilometers an hour. So not great, not terrible. Considering the 7 Series I tested a while back averaged 78 decibels, this isn't bad. Most of the noise coming in through the cabin is coming from the wheel wells, as expected. It's coming from the huge wheels, and that is absolutely normal. I am guessing if you're gonna buy this car in a hybrid or the 156 horsepower version, it will be more quieter simply because those models come with narrower tires, right? So that's something you might want to keep in mind. But overall, this isn't the perfect highway long trip car this is a good inner city car. So let's go inside a busy city and talk about the way it handles over there. Obviously, we've changed the pace and we are inside the city right now, and let's talk about the way this car behaves around town. So the first surprise you're gonna get is in the suspension department, and that's mainly because if you watch my video so far, you notice that this car is absolutely great at carving canyons, right? So it's really good at being a sports car, a hot hatch as I called it earlier. However, that would in most cases, or in a lot of cases, imply that its ride was ruined for day-to-day operations, right? Not exactly. This one has a suspension that absolutely blew my mind. Whereas on that B road you saw earlier, it allowed the car to keep its composure perfectly and be incredibly precise and agile. Around town, it didn't sacrifice that much. Yes, it is a bit stiff around the edges. In certain situations, you will hear a thunk in the cabin if you're going, I don't know, if you hit a pretty big pothole. But other than that, you will be surprised at just how refined it is overall. It deals with bumps and everything you might encounter during your daily trips around town absolutely brilliantly. And I have to praise the suspension when it's worthy of praise. It's quite an interesting combination I never expected between the Alfa Romeo DNA and the Citroën Comfort. And this is what you get. And if you ever thought about what would happen if Alfa Romeo and Citroën got together, this is what it would happen, right? So, yes, I am very satisfied with the way this car behaves around town. It soaks up the bumps brilliantly, despite having 20-inch wheels on a subcompact car, and despite having such a short wheelbase, because normally short wheelbase cars tend to hop around town. That's not really the case here, and I actually like it a lot. Now, the second surprise I got was in terms of charging. I charged this car when I got back inside the city, and I was absolutely blown away by its performance. What do I mean about that? Well, normally, when it comes to recharging electric cars, your expectations have to be quite low, because the charging power and the charging times will be drastically impacted by a really wide variety of factors, from the battery's temperature to the specs of the car overall and to the charging port you're using. So there's a number of things that could go wrong, and most of the time the claimed figures of the manufacturers are not easy to achieve, right? So let's take a look at the specs on the sheet. This car should be able to recharge itself with a maximum power of 100 kilowatts. It's the standard maximum power you will see on most cars built on this platform. And considering the battery is not incredibly, but it's on the smaller side of things, 51 kilowatt hours, you cannot expect huge charging powers. They go hand in hand. So on paper, this car should recharge at with a maximum of 100 kilowatts. When I got to the charging station, the car was at 9% battery. I hooked it up to a 120 kilowatt charging station, and it started charging from the get-go with over 100 kilowatts. So it started at about 101, 102, and then it just went up to 107. And it stayed there for a quite long period of time. So overall, during the charging session, from 9% to 80%, I had an average charging power or speed, call it whatever you want, of 84 kilowatts. And that is just exactly what Alfa Romeo says it should be over the charging curve. They say about 85 kilowatts, but I had 84. But anyway, it was a great performance. It took only 27 minutes to go from 9% to 100 to 80%, right? So yeah, I am impressed by the charging power. What I'm not impressed with though is the range and the energy consumption. Now, mind you, this is not a efficient car by any means, right? So it wasn't designed to be efficient, this version, not the 156 horsepower version, right? You can tell just by looking at the wheels. Now, if you have 20-inch wheels on a car this wide, like the ones we have, it's quite obvious your main focus wasn't to make it efficient. Your main focus was to make this car enjoyable to drive, fun to drive, to put a smile on your face. And I can definitely confirm that happened to me when I drove this car. Therefore, you shouldn't be surprised by the limited range you get with it or by the energy consumption. Now, I drove this car for 100 kilometers around here in Bucharest, and I got an average energy consumption of 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered. That should translate into a range of about 275 kilometers, right? Now, mind you, I did that by very drastically keeping my right foot off the go faster pedal. Because since I compared this car to a hot hatch earlier, I can also compare it in terms of energy consumption, right? Just like any other car, if you step on the gas pedal with absolute thirst, with an unquenchable thirst, of course this car will go through more energy than if you abstain, right? If you withhold from abusing it. So that's the main thing you should take away. I didn't drive this car in a very eco-friendly fashion, right? I wasn't aiming to get the best possible energy consumption, but I didn't abuse it either. And that gave me a result of 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered, which, as I said, should give you a range of about 275 kilometers with a full charge. But if you're gonna have fun a lot more than I did, you should expect a lower range overall. Of course, if it gets even colder out, that range will drop even more. So it will depend on a number of factors, as I mentioned earlier. Another thing I don't like about this car is the fact that I'm not allowed to be more efficient overall. What I mean by that is the fact that you don't have paddles behind the steering wheel to allow you to adjust the regenerative brakes, right? You don't have one pedal drive, you don't have automatic energy recuperation, right, as it happens on a number of other cars. And I think implementing maybe at least one of those solutions could have made this car a bit more efficient, but that's not the case. Now, I get why Alfa Romeo didn't offer you that option on the Veloce model, right? Because you're supposed to enjoy driving it, not think about the energy consumption and worry about regenerative braking. And from what I noticed on other very interesting cars, electric cars, with also with a very big fun factor as well, having regenerative brakes and strong regenerative brakes will kind of ruin the sensation, because they will take a toll on whenever you take your foot off the go faster pedal. The regenerative braking will take away some of that pleasure of driving the car, but it's not that big of a deal. Whatever, let me know in the comments what you think about what I just said, right? If you would prefer regenerative braking or not. Another thing I don't really like, if we're talking about driving this car around town, is the fact that it doesn't have auto hold. Now, auto hold is a subjective matter. I know people who don't really like it. They prefer to keep their foot on the brake at a stoplight. But I use it a lot, right? So I prefer it because in heavy traffic like we're experiencing today, your foot, or your soul, better said, will start getting numb, right? It will start hurting after a while. So auto hold, in my book, is a must in any car today. I prefer to have it and be able to turn it off than not have it at all. But the lacking of auto hold is something all Stellantis models, or all cars built on this platform, have an issue with. You can trick it. You can activate cruise control, right? And cruise control is adaptive, so it will hold you in place if you have a car in front of you. But as soon as that car starts moving, you will move as well. So it's an emulation of the auto hold system. It's funny that when you turn the system on, and if you're stationary, it will show the auto hold symbol in the dashboard, but you cannot activate it manually or deactivate it or anything like that. So I would have liked to have it. Other than that, well, I have to say it's pretty easy to drive this car around town. It's easy to park it. It's short. It has a short wheelbase. It has a fast steering rack. It's faster than the other junior models. Those have a 17 to 1 ratio. This one has a 14 to 1. 14.6 to 1 ratio, so it's a bit faster, so that will help you when you are parking. But I would have preferred a smaller turning radius because it's a small car and I expected it to be easier to maneuver around town. It's not hard to maneuver it, but compared to other electric cars with the same wheelbase and similar length, this is a bit, it does take a couple of extra maneuvers to do the same thing, right? So I would have preferred a better turning radius overall. But it's not terrible. I love the visibility all around, even in the back. The rear window is quite big and not too steep to block out your view. So overall, I like it. I like the rear view cameras. I mean, this car has 360-degree cameras, and they have a good quality even at night. So yeah, it will be easy to navigate busy city streets with it. And the brake pedal is quite soft at first, but you get used to it over time. So yeah, there are some pros and cons, just like it happens with any other car on the market. There's no perfect car, perfect universal car, but you could be striving to find the perfect car for you. Now, let's pull over and try to come up with a couple of conclusions. So, what are the takeaways here? Well, let's talk about pricing and rivals, right? So, if we're talking about the mild hybrid version, there are a number of rivals in this space, right? From the Peugeot 2008 to the Citroën C4 to the Opel Mokka and so on and so forth. The Jeep Avenger, maybe the Dacia Duster as well. I don't know. The Dacia Duster is not exactly premium as this car pretends to be. If we're talking about electric versions, I only see one rival for this car. Since this is a premium model, I'm talking about the Volvo EX30, right? But that one has a dual motor setup. If you wanted to, 400 and something horsepower, it's a lot faster. It's a different breed, right? This was created to be a front-wheel drive beast, a hot hatch, electric hot hatch of sorts, right? So it's something different. Even if you compare it to the Volvo EX30 with a 272 horsepower rear-wheel drive version, they have different feelings, right? And then we need to talk about the pricing. So this car starts at about 46,000 euros, and the car as tested is 55,000 euros. So yeah, quite a lot. And it's pretty hard for me to see how they came up with this price. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very impressive in the way it drives, but at 55,000 euros, you have so many options on the table. And I really can't imagine the customer willing to pay that much for this car. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just too much, right? So who are they looking forward to? Like the die-hard Alfa Romeo enthusiast looking for an electric hot hatch? I don't know if that exists. And it has to be a customer with very deep pockets to buy this car. Maybe the hybrid version will be a lot better, right? So I've heard that the Junior is now the best-selling car in the Alfa Romeo portfolio, and that's to be expected. It is the cheapest in hybrid version. But if we're talking about the Veloce electric, that's a completely different story. But I am curious to learn about what you guys think, and please let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.